Sounds good. Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Real Fucking Talk. I'm your host, Chris Shang, and today we've got Jared Neutel, who is also the founder and CEO of Neutech. Thank you so much for joining us, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me here, Chris. I'm really excited just to have a real fucking talk.
Seriously, dude. No agenda. We are kind of already just talking about this, and we'll pepper that in. But just talking about how you just became a dad and
Yeah,
within the past month, and you're just kind of like talking about some of the things that becoming more introspective and thinking about how there's probably like pre-baby, after daughter, whatever it might be.
yeah,
But like, what has changed? What are you feeling now? And like, how has that changed? Like, what was pre-Jared like? Now, what's post-Jared like, or the trajectory of post-Jared?
yeah. That's a great question, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about this in the sleepless nights, as they say, just to make sense of it all, right? Because when this change happens, it there's no going back, and it happens very quickly. So you don't have much time. Usually when you're making a big decision, business, relationship, anything else, it's you have a lot of time to think it through, or you have a lot of time to really place each piece on the chessboard. When you have a child, you make a plan and then they start screaming, and that plan changes, right, very quickly. So I've been doing my best to play catch up, but there's a lot of learning to be had in the chaos, right? And I find it very fascinating. I've changed in ways that I frankly didn't expect. There were things that I knew would change, like not being able to sleep very much. It's very different living that versus talking about it. I knew that I would have to have a change at work to be the father that I want to be, right? I wanted to be a very hands-on dad. I think that our generation is more introspective and with our emotions and what we want to, how we want to live our lives. Whereas previous generations, the baby boomers and other generations even after them potentially were very career oriented, which doesn't mean that we aren't career oriented. It just means that we have other things that drive us as well. And I think that it's been a very fun journey for me to try and navigate what's the difference between being ambitious and wanting to be present, like we were talking about, right? And in my world right now, that looks like being present as a father, not wanting to miss those moments, wanting to be there to support my wife. So it's been a really fun journey. I've made some early conclusions, and I'm excited to jump into them.
Yeah. What are some of those conclusions? Let's talk about it.
So I'll start from the perspective as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I this is the piece that I didn't expect, right? I didn't expect my view of business to change. Maybe the day to day, maybe who I work with potentially, but not how I think about business. That I didn't think would change. And what I found is that I've always known something about myself, which is very liberating to talk about out loud, which is that I'm a fear-based entrepreneur.
Interesting.
Uh, Meaning, more in depth, I would be more concerned and have more anxiety around losing a client, right? Or not being available for a client, or taking 10 minutes to respond to them on Slack because I was in another meeting, right? Or
Yeah.
something like that. I would get so much anxiety from that, more so than the joy I would receive from getting a new client,
Yeah.
right? And for the longest time, it's a very powerful fuel. It's a very powerful fuel. It allowed me to self-motivate, to work those extra hours, to be on the ball at all times. It did take away from being present and took away from my life, my personal life, and other such things. But it was a very powerful tool to get me to where I am now. When you look at my business, I took it 0 to 1, and I've grown a large global team. That doesn't happen by being complacent, right? But I feel as though I burned very dirty fuel, right? Internally to get to that place. And I know that's just not going to be sustainable moving forward. So what's interesting is knowing that I'm a fear-based entrepreneur, I always just accepted it. I never really questioned why or how. I didn't know why or how, frankly. I just knew that I was, and it took a lot of effort to figure that out even. And what's very fascinating is that when I had McKenna, my daughter, with my wife, She had McKenna. I was there to watch. I got to give her credit.
Yeah.
Yeah, she went through the pain, not me. Um, but what's fascinating is in the moments afterwards, not in the exact moment, but a few hours later, and we had some time to ourselves. I realized why I was a fear-driven entrepreneur, and I think it comes from a place that for so long I attached my self-worth and my value to the business, right?
I get you.
Yeah, and my success or failure became very personal because that was the first time in my life. You can succeed at school, can succeed in relationships, and you can succeed in other endeavors that you do. But if you don't feel the fulfillment from those things, or you don't feel as though you are leveling up, right, per se, um, you're not going to get fulfillment from it. And frankly, it came from a place of lack of confidence. Now, what's interesting is my business is, knock on wood, very early emerging, hopefully success. Hopefully we can continue on that trajectory, right? I was able to attach that success with those emotions. I was able to feel successful. I was able to feel confident in myself for something that is objectively impressive, right? And I think that was just really unhealthy because now I didn't get to that place of self-worth and self-confidence um organically. Kind of, I guess it was organic, but through the wrong channel. And so so why would I fear losing a client more than gaining a new one? Because I almost felt like I was losing a piece of me. And what happens if things now failed as a result of losing that client? And then what would that mean for how I view myself? Right. And now it's not just me that I have to be responsible for. It's a family. It's a wife who I need to be a good husband to, and it's a child who I need to be an even better father to, right? So it's all of those emotions. Now, that flipped when my purpose changed to the thing that matters the absolute most to me more than anything in the world, where I want to drive my value from and my confidence from is being a father.
Mm,
That's how I want to be judged. I couldn't, I care about the business. My ambition is still there. It's not that I'm now like, okay, like let's just level out and, call it. That's not at all. I still have my same ambitious goals, but I no longer let the business's success or failure define me or my purpose. That purpose has shifted, and I find myself in a position now where I'm able to make clearer decisions. I'm able to
mm,
position myself differently within the business as a leader, which is actually proving to be even more successful for my team and for my clients. My clients right now are all seeing success as a result of me actually stepping away a little bit, and empowering the people that are in the day to day. And now I can shift my focus to, instead of trying getting emotional and attaching all of these decisions and the stress and the anxiety on a microcosm of decision, I can look at the forest, not just, try and search through the trees and see bigger value that I can give to my team who is in the weeds, right? So I just that is the biggest takeaway as it pertains to how fatherhood has changed my business outlook. And then of course how I use that time is something that I'm still figuring it out.
interesting. Yeah, man. I mean, that's one conclusion. I mean, I can relate to a lot of that. For you having a kid, for me, like 5 years of therapy. But like, I think one trade off is yours is a little bit faster. But I think like I resonate. Like all those things that you talked about. I ran an agency for 7 years, and like a lot of that in the very beginning is, yeah, it's like when you're trying to build up that book of business to have some level of consistency. It's like you kind of
Yeah,
got to like those double digits of like clients for you to be like, oh, okay, I can plus or minus a few, not going to be the end of the world. But to get there is like, it is the constant thing of like being at everybody's beck and call. Part of it's not feeling like you're worth it. Part of it, you probably really don't know a lot of shit that you're trying to like build confidence in terms of like what you are expressing forward in terms of like your shit, but you are the type of person to figure it out. I mean, that's pretty much
right.
like founder, right? It's like, or every entrepreneur, it's like it's the ability. People are actually paying you to um because you have the willingness and the ability to solve a unique problem that they
Hmm.
cannot uniquely solve, right? So I think like that's at the core of it what entrepreneurship really is about. But that's so awesome that I think you kind of remove your personal value and self-worth from the business. And I've found that to be something that I've I've been working on for the past like year or 2 years, and really have found that sweet spot of, past like, yeah, past 6 months to a year of just like removing my own personal value from it. And knowing that, I think like in doing that too, it's like it gives you a perspective shift. And maybe you could tell me about if this resonates with you, is like
Yeah,
it's not like that the chaos changes, or like that spectrum of ebbs and flows changes necessarily, but the way that you view it, it's almost like this peaceful acceptance of like there will always be a fire, so I always have my fire extinguisher next to me, and it's just like a different relatability to it, right? And I think like it's a point that I think like a lot of entrepreneurs get to, where it's like the obviously the implications of not necessarily solving for it in a timely manner will be larger the larger your company scales, but the you can grow thicker skin, you can have more of a higher threshold towards these things, and it can actually give you more peace of mind because you just accept and roll with the punches a little bit easier than you did before. You mentioned the anxiety, like I remember those things, those feelings, but it's like that problem will still be there tomorrow. That
yeah,
person's not they're not going to make a like a business decision based on you not responding in 24 hours or even 12
right.
hours, or what it might be, right? It's like, so nobody's going to make these like rash decisions that I think we internalize when we place that pressure on ourselves. But I'm curious as to like, when you kind of like are going through this epiphany moment, um, how do you feel like that's the case? Like, I mean, like the pressures are still there, like the urgency is still there, but your relationship with maybe some of those things is a little bit different now versus like how it was before.
Totally. I, so what's interesting about how this happened for me, right, is that my wife and I didn't expect to actually have our daughter the day we did. In fact,
Yeah.
she was
Right.
she was a month early. In fact, we were supposed to have this chat a month ago,
Yeah.
and we had to move it because I just was in the hospital with my wife giving birth. She developed a medical complication. Thank God she's okay.
To that point,
And
you were even still about to hop on, which is crazy to me. Like, you're about to hop on because we didn't cancel in time. And I was like, dude, this guy's nuts. It's like you're saying a couple days after you guys had a baby. And I was like, dude, no, no way. Like, and
I appreciate you, dude. Yeah.
anyway, they're willing to hop on is what I was trying to say. It's like, it's crazy.
But that goes back to the previous Jared,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
like that's who I was. It's just fearful of missing an opportunity.
Yeah.
And now I would say, yeah, dude, of course I had to have moved it to as far as we have. And I'm glad we did because I have so many more interesting things to say based off of the experience. So thank you for your understanding, Chris. But even going back to that, right? We didn't expect to induce our daughter when we did, and we did because of a medical complication. So what does that mean, right? That meant that I had meetings that weren't canceled.
Yeah.
That I called my assistant and I said, listen, Jordan, I'm in the hospital with my wife. This is happening right now, and I need you to cancel all my meetings for the next week. Just, clients weren't prepared. I was planning on starting to prepare that. I mean, most of them knew that I was, my wife and I were having a baby soon, but I wasn't prepared to have that shift happen right there and then when it did happen, right? And so I said, listen, they were unprepared. I said, you got to cancel, explain what's going on and cancel it or delegate it to somebody else on the team that can handle it. And I went completely cold turkey from the business for about a week and a half. I mean, I didn't even check my Slack. I got back to Slack. I was like, wow, there's like 200 messages. I don't even know what to do here. And I read through it all. And what I found is that everything got resolved. By the end of it, there was maybe one or two action
Right.
items. Most of everything else got resolved by the
Right.
team. And frankly, I started thinking to myself, wow, the team's got this. Let me see what happens for another week before inserting myself back into the business. I'll still be here. I'll still be, crazy sleep deprived and working from home and all of these things, but I wonder if I don't reinsert myself back into a client conversation, how would that benefit the team? How would that benefit me? How would that benefit the client, right? Themselves. And what I found is that it actually did benefit everyone. It was a win-win-win. The team felt empowered. They were able to advance themselves. They handled it with grace. They knew exactly what they needed to do. My clients, felt very, very satisfied with everything and felt even almost better having my team there. But knowing that I was around to escalate something to, was helpful. Now, what does that mean for my team? Instead of me being in the day-to-day challenges of, okay, we need to fix this, function on this, to solve this problem for our client by this day, and stressing out about, this teammate doing that. And I was micromanaging, right? My time was really not needed to micromanage. The team knew what they needed to do. It was just a matter of how do I voice that to a client? And do I really need to spend my whole day trying to strategize how to say something to a client when the person that's working on it could sufficiently do that? They knew what they needed to do. I have managers that know how to lead those people, those engineers. And so I thought to myself, wow, maybe actually taking a view from the top down from that perspective actually in turn would create more value for my clients, because no one was doing that before, right? Everyone was in the weeds, including me. And I was there reacting to things versus trying to be proactive. So I thought to myself, okay, here's a client that has a rock solid team. Um, Everything's going fine. But how could the process be better? How could I get them more bang for their buck with working with us by repositioning a few things, or thinking of a new process,
Mm,
or how can I help guide their roadmap a little bit by speaking with them on points that I probably wouldn't have thought too deeply on had I been in the weeds. And so it's interesting because my team would always escalate bigger issues to me to help resolve, and I'm not going away from those. But did I need to be there all the time? I actually think I added more value not being there to me, because I didn't feel the day-to-day anxiety of the stress from every client, not just one, right? It was better for the engineers to take a leadership position, and be more forward-facing and less reliant on me doing the talking. They didn't need me, frankly, to do that, and I had trouble letting go. And then for my clients, like now they had somebody thinking about their project from a completely different perspective, and the same, getting the same output from the team on the day to day. So it was a win-win-win for everybody, right? So, looking at perspective, right? Going back to, I believe, the original question was how have my perspectives,
yep,
changed, right? I was completely unprepared. Things changed on a dime. Instead of just trying to snap back into the comfort zone, I let myself analyze what was going on. And then I was able to draw some of these awesome new perspectives, and frankly take my business hopefully to that next level.
absolutely. Yeah, I find like when I was kind of going through that, like my role now is so different than it was a year ago. And like a lot of it's just on content and hiring. Like,
Hmm.
and, and it was for a long time, it is stressing about like all the little things and worrying about all the little things, thinking that you're not going to be able to grow, you're going to lose, you're going to go backwards. But the moment you start entrusting other people, it does like open things up pretty quickly, and things become very transparent around like how strong team members actually are. And then there's
Yeah,
obviously some that, depending on the size of the team, like some that aren't as strong, but like it becomes a lot more clear versus like the more that I felt like the more I was inserting myself, it's also like people become reliant on that feedback loop almost, as
right,
opposed to like allowing them to creatively problem solve. And that's to me like the thing that you can start identifying real strengths in people, like real leadership in individuals. Like they're not relying on you necessarily as like that crutch anymore, and
right.
that allows them that freedom to like really grow and shine. Um,
I totally agree. I mean, one of the most successful people I've had the pleasure of meeting, he told me, he's a multi-billionaire, right? And I asked him, like, hey, Eric, his name's Eric, what is the most important thing you could teach me? Little old small business Jared, about business. Like, what is the most important thing? What's my most important takeaway? And he said, it's very simple. Always keep your finger on the pulse, right? And for the longest time, I was like, wow, that's awesome. I agree. I got to be in the weeds on everything. And that's what, sparked another level of anxiety to like just insert myself everywhere. But then when I've started to realize now, even looping this back to, in a past life, I was a biology major and wanted to be a doctor, and that didn't happen. Sorry, mom and dad. But what I learned is that sometimes the best reading you can get on a pulse is when you have a very light touch,
yep.
right? The lighter that you touch, the better you can actually feel a very slight pulse in somebody, versus if you press really hard, you may not feel anything. So in a way, using his analogy and maybe taking it to another level, I was reading the pulse incorrectly, right? I wasn't getting the best reading because I was too close. And if I want to grow the business to another level, I have to your point, empower the people that are very capable of being empowered to do their jobs and do it well, better than in most times better than even I could, right? And then now I can keep a lighter touch on that pulse, but actually get more valuable information. So it's just fascinating how you're right. I think that sometimes by empowering people, you actually maximize your potential and theirs a hell of a lot more. And I think that I'm ready to take the next step in my business as a result of being able to have come to that realization. It's just very scary to do it because this is my baby, right? This is what I've created from my other baby, my old baby. But my 10-year-old baby versus my 1 month-year-old baby. But it's something that I now have the ability to grow it better in different ways and innovate and insert myself on bigger problems that I just never had the time to solve. I was too exhausted, right? So that's a different level of exhaustion, but I find even from working from home more consistently, I find that I'm actually more effective because I always thought, wow, I like being at work and like putting in my world 12 hours or so, 12, 13 hours, going home, and then I'm at home, I'll like eat some dinner with my wife. We'll watch Survivor or something on the couch. I'll fall asleep. Last night was Dancing with the Stars, and fall asleep and then start it again, right? What I find interesting too, is that I find myself working more and working more effectively
Yeah.
with having breaks throughout the day. So,
Yep.
my wife says, "Hey, I need, to change. I need your help to change a diaper. She wants to go shower or something. Somebody needs to watch McKenna." And I say, "Okay, like I'm in between meetings now. I'll like maybe have a quick bite. I'll change her diaper. I'll watch her or whatever." I come back. I'm like, "Oh, here's a fresh take on that problem I was trying to solve right before." Which usually happens when you take a step back and come back to it a day, for me in my world, a day later, right? I got to that conclusion so much faster. So I feel as though I'm solving problems faster. I end up working more hours. And all to say, I thought, wow, it just past Jared would say, man, this guy here is like not focused, right? I actually find myself more focused than ever. And being able to balance more things has made me a more effective leader.
Yeah, I've gone through that too, man. And I would just say, there was a period too where I would feel guilt for like taking that time, but then it was like doing it more consistently. To me, it's like going for a walk or going to the gym in the middle of the day, like literally
Yeah,
like 1 o'clock or something like that, be gone for an hour and a half to 2 hours and then come back. And, I think like just, and as I've interviewed a lot more founders, like this is pretty common, like the journey that you're talking about like letting go, maturing, like these are all I've seen, like having interviewed founders that have gone on to raise like hundreds of millions of dollars, build billion-dollar businesses. This is like all part of the journey. Like this is stuff that I see in every single person having talked about it. And it's like, it's, it's that level of, it is a certain level of productivity that happens when you are able to disconnect periodically throughout the day with that new, because what ends up happening for me at least, it's like I can easily explain it. That's a little bit very more tangible, but it's like I'll be on like an exercise bike and like I'll be on there and I'm kind of like burning some calories and but I'm still thinking about work. Like I'm not like it's
totally.
not me like completely out in the distance, right? But my body's doing something different, which is like helping me get away from it. I'm driving to the gym, not really then thinking about work, so that there's a little break and disconnect mentally for a short period of time. And then physically, my body's going through something different. So that's a different kind of input. And then all of a sudden I come back, oh, I have to go back and do these things. And then I find it's like when I started leaving the laptop more and like spending half my time physically away from a laptop, I ended up becoming much more hyper efficient. When I would come back, it would just be
Totally.
like, now I just got it done. And instead of like spinning my wheels for like 2 hours, I was in front of my laptop for a half an hour, getting the same amount of work done. And I was also able to go get in some exercise, refresh,
Yeah.
rewire my brain. And I just think like that's such a interesting thing. And I think like we put a lot of pressure on ourselves as founders, as entrepreneurs, because it is your child. And I think that's part of the journey. Like I think you have to go through that because most people also wouldn't obsess about it. Like most
Right.
people would be like, that's really hard. I'm on 13 hours. Like I'm gonna walk away. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
and I think that's what prevents them to get to where you are at now, and obviously getting to a certain level of success within building a business and being an entrepreneur. But then to level up beyond that, it's this journey that you're on now, which is like the disconnect, the ability to have a different perspective. And then that's when you're starting to solve these bigger problems, the bigger things that allow you to truly like scale the business to the next level, which is super exciting.
Yeah, man, exactly. I completely agree. And I love what you do with going to the gym halfway through the day. I've been finding myself going to the gym first thing in the morning
Yeah.
because that's just the only time my wife and my
Yeah.
baby are both sleeping. But it's the same thing. I would usually do that maybe after work if I'm not too tired. And
Yeah.
hot take, I think the most important part about going into an office space, a live office space, which I don't really do as much anymore, but other than collaboration with peers, if you're not a remote business, the most important thing is that commute time. I
Yeah.
think that having
Yeah.
that time to think through your thoughts and do another action, I think you put that really well. It's a way of keeping a light finger on the pulse because you're not at a screen. You have to pay attention to the road, or
Yep.
you should be at least, right? And by virtue of that, you actually get better insight. So actually having some level of commute time or detachment is very valuable. And the fact that you're able to do it during the day is going to make that second half of the day,
Yeah.
just as valuable as the first half, right? And you'll be re-energized. You'll go to the gym, your blood's pumping, you'll have a newfound energy when you come back. So it's almost like you've had your first cup of coffee at 8 a.m., right? Or in my case, 6 a.m.
Yeah.
So I think that's awesome. And I completely agree with that approach. I think it's valuable, and I've already seen dividends. I mean, I'm at a point now where I'm in back in the business. I'm doing different things and figuring out what that looks like. I'm trying to plug some of the holes, identify and then plug holes that exist that I didn't previously see, now that I have the time to do so and the energy to do so. And I've even found myself innovating more, and actually building another, I guess, for now, product within the business that I didn't have before, based off of being able to have a new perspective that actually will help a lot of my existing clients and covered a pain of my own, right? So I'm excited to share, about that and launch it and put people in place just like I did at Neutech to run that, product or business, right? I think you're right. This is what that next step I think looks like. And I I know that it's going to take a lot of learning still, right?
Yeah.
I'm just at the very beginning of it. I don't attach an ego with this stuff.
Yeah.
I try not to, at least. I'm a pimple on the ass of the successful people in this world, right?
Yeah.
But hopefully I can you know grow up a little even more.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that has stuck with me, and I guess I coined this. I share this with a few other founders, but I feel like it's when you realize it's a marathon disguised as a sprint, meaning that,
Hmm.
um, like I know, with our business Leader Pro, like if I've accepted that this business will be around for the next 5 to 10 years. Is it going to have ups and downs? Absolutely. Is it going to be like times where you might think it's going to go out of business? Sure. I've had that already before. There's going to be times where it's going to be like so, tremendous growth where you're also going to be like, are we able to handle this? Are we going to have customers turn it? You're still going to have those thinkings. But if you accept that this is a marathon, this is how long it's going to take. So I might as well continue to live my life the best way I can
Right.
in between that time, right? Because I'm still gonna have to come back to this, and I'm still gonna have to do this tomorrow. But in the meantime, like it's helped me find so much more joy, I think, like personally, but then also just like with what you could do with the business. Because it's like now you start thinking about like, okay, well, what can I do today that actually might have it's gonna if it's gonna take me a year to get to that outcome, right? Like what can I be doing today,
Right.
to help generate some of that stuff so that I'm not going to realize it tomorrow. I'm not going to realize it 3 months, 6 months from now, but I've accepted it's going to take me a year to realize some of these things. But that's like, then it starts you like changing the gears. You're like, oh, okay, well, if that's the case, and that's the time of the expected ROI, like it helps you actually build, I feel like a much stronger foundation that is actually realized in a shorter term, but it's like you never thought of it going into it. It's only like in hindsight. So I'll think about like, for example, a lot of this, like these podcast stuff that I've been doing. Like I've been
Yeah.
really going ham the past 5 months. We've done like 150 of these, two a
Damn, dude.
day for like, yeah. And it's like, and I didn't expect to reap any reward from it immediately, but it's like now I look and we track like all of the audience that we're getting from all the guests. And we've gotten exposure to like over 10 million people on LinkedIn based on the resharing of this thing in
Wow.
like 5, 6 months, right? So it's like, so then so then it gives you other ideas to do and how to leverage and blah, blah, blah. But like, I didn't expect it. It was like a half-baked idea. Took me 1 to 2 weeks to kind of just, let's do this.
Yeah.
And then, and then over time, it just starts equating into something that's actually tangible in value. And I think like, that's the really exciting part I feel like you're in right now. It's like, you're going to find a lot of different avenues to spend your time. And obviously not all of them will work, but you will find the things that will surprisingly, I think like, oh shit, this is one of those things. This is one of those levers I can really like lean into, and it's going to change the scope of the business.
What's interesting about what you just said is that also with time, I would say in the beginning of my career, or even halfway through my career, I found that you take some of those shots and you're like, oh, this could work, this also could not work, and you're taking the feeling of the risk, feels bigger than it does now. Now I feel I'm like, oh
Yeah.
wow, this is a good idea. Then I know how to challenge that idea. I know how to test that idea. I go through the same steps that I tell all my clients to go through, right? Like, don't just pay me to build something for you. You should actually go out there, do some market research, do a
Yeah.
discovery, validation, do a very unscalable way of approaching the problem just to validate that you have product market fit, build a product, it doesn't have to be the end product. Do it cheap, do it in a way that doesn't, knowing you'll throw it out eventually, right? Or build an enterprise if you happen to do have that product market fit, right? That's how we advise different people. Do a bubble build or a low code build versus doing a full-fledged, platform build, properly to scale. So I find that the going back to what you said, you just got to take those shots. And as time develops, I have a better sense of this is probably not going to work. Or, oh wow, this is going to work. And I think it's going to work really. And you get better at pinpointing those things. I mean, I bet you didn't expect to have the success with the pods that you have this quickly, but I bet you knew that it was going to happen eventually, or
Yeah,
you had hoped.
I'd hoped. I feel like, to me, content can create a moat, right? Like, because the more that you create, ultimately, like the more that you have, it's like to me, it's an asset for any business that you can
Hmm.
repurpose, right? So like every episode, like we can cut this 5, 6 different ways. Then it's not just for this next week or next month. So a lot of these things can be relatable still a year from now, right? You can repurpose all these things. So yeah, I mean, like I think for me, what we've been thinking about has been like creating as much internal content to understand what people engage with the most. And so we can lean in deeper around that. That I knew was part of this experiment, was like try to
Hmm.
figure out what our audience actually will engage with. And so like a lot of it's just trying a lot of different types of topics.
Yeah.
And then we can get more narrow, right? The ones that we saw more engagement with. So that's kind of been it. And based off of that learning, the idea is to start curating other third-party content. And what we'll do is we'll start gating it. And the idea is to build like a Netflix for professionals. And so we'll
That's
have like
awesome.
a curated version of all that. And then, our platform, we're trying to like make that discovery process for new software, new B2B solutions a little bit more organic, because you're coming in for a piece of content. And by the way, this content's related to this solution in this way.
Right.
And that makes it a little bit different for the user to feel. So that's kind of how we didn't know it was all going to come to that like full circle necessarily. It was maybe stuff that we had talked about bits and pieces throughout our life cycle, but never knew how it was going to come together. And it's again just investing in the time into something that, yeah, that I think that's part of it. It's just like you have to give things time to matriculate and like actually mature into something. Um,
Yeah.
and sometimes, yeah, you can figure out, pretty quickly what's not going to work. But then sometimes you're going to be like, okay, it's not definitive, it's not going to work. It just needs to have more time and continue to do it and be more consistent with it.
Totally.
Yeah,
Patience.
yeah. And I think that's probably like in my evolution as entrepreneur, as well as like just advising other startups too, is like you mentioned how you advise, your clients and other companies around the process of getting the product market fit. And I think like,
Yeah.
um, that process to getting the product market fit, the market research part of it and all that stuff, the science behind it, it's like, I think most, I think, I don't know if it's most people understand that that's part of it, but now you're very keen on the value of it, right? And I feel like if I'm to start anything new, that's the basis. Like, get the data
Totally.
to validate, and then figure out what should you actually build, and use the research to validate complexity of the build of a specific feature or whatever it might be, and then the necessity of that for that audience, right? And then you find the combination to figure out what you roll out with. And you're not going to service
Right.
100% of the people, but if you can service 80% and get 100 people to love it, it's a lot more easier to scale from there than it is to build something that, is, I would say, mostly out of ego or fear of what the market's going to say, and then try to go to market. That's so much more hard.
Yeah, I think that the biggest concept that's hard for founders when I advise them on, I mean, again, I'm a software business,
Yeah,
right? I mean, Neutech is we help build those companies to an enterprise level. That's what we do. We can help you build an MVP. We can help you take something fully enterprise and to the point we have customers that have millions of users on our infrastructure and it's still scaling well, right? So we're a senior level team. But what's funny is that when people come to me in the very beginning, I'm not really trying to sell them on me. I'm trying to actually push them away from spending a dime until they figured their thing out. Because for me, what's going to happen? A customer will
yeah,
come to me, they'll pay me X amount of money to build something probably enterprise. The business won't be viable. They'll get frustrated. They'll run out of money. If their investors will go away, and now I lose a client,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
I would far prefer, and by no wrongdoing of us, right? I would far prefer to advise somebody, hey, think this through, take the time,
Yep,
invest in that time, even spend some money to figure things out. Um, Sell your product before we build it,
yep,
right? That's such a hard concept for people to understand. It's like, why spend my new product, Neutech. It's newcheck.ai. And I'm building it. And I before I built a lick of AI, I did all of the essential stuff that I can actually, the unscalable things to get a good product. But they're unscalable, and it was done it was based off of manpower versus technology. But before that, I needed to validate that this thing was
yeah,
even worth investing in, right? So I sold the product. I said, hey, this doesn't have AI yet, but this is what it's going to do. We'll validate it for you later. And we sold it and it worked. And people were happy to spend the money that they spend on it. And they got a lot of value. Now there is AI, right? Now it does. We spent the time building the product. It's very, it works extremely well. And before I wanted to spend a dime on it, even though I thought it was a good idea, I sold it to a few people, obviously with the caveats of that it's early stage and all these things at a discounted rate. But I wanted to see if they would spend. I wanted to
yeah,
even see if it was valuable. And founders need to do that, right? To that same point, you got to. I talk them out of it. I'm like, hey, don't build this yet. Go do some market research. Sell it before you build it. And then if you sell it and you have a waiting list or you have value or you have a good indication that this is going to work, now let's build it. And then, let's build it in a very, let's build it in a scalable way because now you validated your idea. So you have the product market fit. And then hopefully when that business comes back to me, the idea is that I can retain the client for
yeah,
far longer because we've built that trust because I'm not just trying to sell them everything that I can try and sell them, right? Um, but two, that the business is viable. So there's always funding to pay for our services, right? So it's interesting how the agent there's we're like an anti-agency agency, right? Like I actually hate how agencies typically function, and I wanted to build one to not be like the other guys, ironically, as an agency. But the whole thing is, I want to make sure that founders are in a good place because if they're in a good place, so will we,
yeah,
right? And that's important. There's agencies that will just sell you what they can,
yeah,
and don't care about the future. They just want to, squeeze the juice out of the single orange. I want to help you grow an orange tree, and if I can pick one orange a year, that's great.
yep. No, I agree 1000%. And I mean, yeah, I guess like my curiosity has been, you can say that, you can say this, you can advise them exactly, give them the exact instructions and guide
Hmm.
of like how to validate, how to do product market fit without spending a dime on production, right? Yeah.
Yep.
And less than 10% will ever do it. And I I'm curious as to your thinking as to why. Like, why do you still see those that's like, oh, okay, fine, I'm not gonna work with you, but I'm good. Then they go still spend this money somewhere else. And
Yeah.
then, get to the probably very, I see it happen all the time where then they still end up in a very dire outcome. And it could have been preventable 90% of the
Hmm.
time, right? So,
And then they'll come back to you to try and fix it, right?
right, yeah,
Uh, I've thought about this a lot actually. I think it comes down to a couple of key ideas.
mm,
And it's not a one size fit all thought, right? One, I think it comes down to ego.
yep,
I think that founders, especially early founders, are very sure of themselves, which is a beautiful thing. That confidence will lead you in many different ways. But I think that founders need to be a bit more humble in the fact that maybe something that they think is valuable or they think somebody will use, let's see if they actually use it. Let's see if
yeah,
they actually will pay for your service, right? And at the end of the day, what you have to come up with a business plan for. A lot of people come up with ideas of cool products and things, but they haven't even thought through monetization. So
yep,
it's like, okay, how do you expect to get investors if there's no monetization plan? How do you expect to get an ROI on what you're building without a monetization plan? And the reason is they think that this is the best invention ever or best product ever, and there's an ego around it. So I think that's, for earlier founders, that energy can be channeled differently, and sometimes it'd be better if they shed the ego for just a moment and thought to themselves, let me just validate. I think this is going to be great. I'm confident this is going to be great, but let me do some tests to make sure it's going to be great so that before I spend this money. There's the other piece of it where they are convinced that timing is like, oh, this has to happen now. And if it doesn't happen now, then I'm going to lose my shot. Right. Which is such bullshit. Right. Like, Apple is doing just fine. Were they the first computer ever? Were they
right,
the first cell phone? Were they the first anything? Apple is notorious for creating a version of something that's just better, and in my opinion,
yep,
but they were never first to market on anything except for the Vision Pro, and we all know how that's doing, right? So, it's from that sense, founders are, I think, they are so invested in, I want to make this happen now. It's got to go now. And then they put a lot of unnecessary pressure on themselves on their product, and they spend their resources up front. They haven't thought it through. They probably go with a cheaper team to do so. I would much rather see a customer spend their money going through a proper, well thought out discovery and then go get funding based off of that discovery than build a half working MVP and run out of budget and because and have to, oh, we need the money to pivot there. It's like you could have done that through a proper discovery with proof of concept work and market research and all these different things, right? And investors would, in my opinion, be happier to spend money based off of that than on a half-baked product that doesn't meet the mark because it wasn't well thought out. So I think it's also falling victim to time because they're like, I have to build this now or I'm going to miss my shot. And frankly, that's not true, right? Like they can take their time, do it right, and if what they're building is truly valuable, it should be somewhat timeless,
yeah,
right? And if it's not timeless or doesn't provide value, then it's going to be a short-lived business anyways,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
There is value to being first to market, but how many products are out there that are truly first to market, and how many of them are actually successful?
yep,
It's Uber, Lyft exists, right? Like Lyft is doing great. I think. I mean, I would imagine they're the main competitors. Every good business, and that's another thing, right? They say, "Oh, like I don't want to do this thing because somebody else is doing it." It's like, dude, like if somebody is trying to copy you or trying to be and compete with you, that's awesome. It means that's another point of validation that what you're doing is valuable.
yep,
And people that get so obsessed with the fact that, oh, this other company's doing this and doing it that way and blah blah blah. It's like, dude, like don't don't let that, hit you off your confidence, because if other people copying you because what you're doing seems to be successful is going to bring you down, then you have no business. You don't have the mental fortitude to run this business anyways.
yeah,
Right? So I
agreed.
don't know.
Yeah, I feel like every idea has been thought of 6 ways to Sunday. It's just all about execution at the end of the day. It's the same thing as
Totally.
I feel like any like music artist too. It's like it's all about authenticity and sincerity and genuineness. And and to me, that even translates into entrepreneurship. It's like, if you can tell through the product, even the ones that really care about the problem and the ones that really like care about solving something altruistically for the end user or the customer,
Mhm.
versus the ones that are trying to, just try to make a dollar. Like it, and I saw it last week at like SaaStr, and you can see like the companies that are struggling to grow and just put like an AI layer over a dashboard and calling it something different, and it's not
Yeah.
providing any real tangible value that's unique for the market. And I think like it's interesting. I mean, I think it's forcing people to forcing people to rethink and innovate and change. And we're going to see probably a lot of different types of changes happen in the next few years. But yeah, I agree. I know we're way over time. So last note here, just last question would just be, with the daughter here, just a month in, but
Yeah.
back in the office, what other, I'm not going to ask you where you think you're going to be in the next 6 months to a year, but what kind of developments or changes, again, whether personally or professionally, do you think might be happening on the horizon? Like what other like what and we don't even need to worry about like the implication or like the byproduct,
Yeah.
those instigators, but what are some of the things that you think might instigate some next level epiphany or change for you?
That's a great question. I think that as a father, it's going to be just a revolving door
Yeah,
of challenges to overcome. And I think that it's so easy to make myself victim right now of the moment of like, wow, this is so hard. I'm not sleeping. I don't think that that's going to change over the next 6 months. I
yeah,
think that on the personal level, I'm going to evolve, right? And my time will be more efficient. I'll have to find ways to innovate my role at work to be able to support that lack of sleep, to be able to be that hands-on father. I told my wife, right when we got pregnant, I don't care what's going on at work. I will not miss a single doctor's appointment.
that's right.
And I went to every single one, and I was with her the entire time in the hospital, and I didn't miss a moment of that, right? I held true to my word on it. And that was of course for her, but it was for me, right? I needed to be able to prove to myself that this is greater than anything else. And I was able to do it without even much hesitation, which is great, right? It meant I was ready to be a father in that way, because I can put my daughter before she was even born ahead of anything. So I think that on the personal level, it's going to be the realization and finding new efficiencies with, I've already made some early conclusions, but even more, how does this new life, work with growth in the business and hold up to my ambition? Um, I would say that on the business level, um, I think that I needed to make myself redundant in this business, and I
Mm,
feel as though I'm getting very close to having done that. I think that I'm a jack of all trades, hopefully master of many, call it master of none, whatever, the eye of the beholder on the expression. But I feel as though I can do a lot of different things really well. But I needed to put people in place that can do each of those tasks better than me,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
I can do it well, but maybe not the best. And I hired and have awesome colleagues on my team that can do those things better than me. So, okay, so what does that mean for me at work? What does my next 6 months look like? It means that now I'm going to be experiencing new roles, discovering what does the business need, filling that role, trying to figure it out, just like I did Neutech in the beginning, trying things, failing, eventually cracking something, and then either making that piece of it the responsibility of somebody existing within the company or hire for somebody to do it and start to build an infrastructure that can be self-supporting. So what do I see for new tech in the next 6 months to a year? Hopefully an infrastructure that doesn't rely on me at all. And so, right now it's not the case. We're getting closer, but it's not the case. But in 6 months to a year, maybe it could be. And what does that allow me to do? That allows me to do, I can fly out to New York for a meeting, right? Or I can go take a week off and be with my family. And me adding to the business can only add to it, but it's me not being there is not going to take away. That's what I'm hoping to get to on the business level in the next 6 months to a year. Ironically, in the same way of being able to be more present at home. So
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. I think it's going to be a journey. I think that we could hopefully have this conversation again in 6 months, and I'll probably still be a ways away because there's always something that comes up that, oh, I need to do this other thing. But that's the entrepreneur's dilemma, right? Is there's always another new innovation to do.
Yeah,
But that's what makes life exciting.
for sure. On that note, thank you so much for taking the time, man, sharing your personal story as well as your professional one. Lots of great stuff. And yeah, congratulations again. I can tell you're gonna
Thanks,
be a
Chris.
father. It's been it looks you're doing the right things, man. You're
I'm
making
trying.
that's
Fake it
awesome.
till you make it. Thank
There
you
you
so
go, man.
much, Chris. And it's
Sure.
great to chat with you. And I'm here for you. Whatever I can do to add value to you or your community and network. I'm really excited for what you have on the horizon as well. And I can't wait to have more conversations like this.
Sounds good.
All right, take care.